Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 153 of Two Amazon Sellers and a Microphone, brought to you by Sellozo. And today, Chris and I are excited to bring back a former guest on our show, Ben Leonard from Ecom Brokers. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm good. It's good to be back. Nice to speak with you guys again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, he was on episode 74. So about exactly the halfway point of where we are now. You were on. So time flies. And now we got all kinds of great stuff to talk about because we're gonna talk a lot about what makes your business valuable, what makes it attractive to buyers, and then also like what kind of buyers should you be going after. This is a interesting space right now for sure. So there's a ton to talk about. So, but before we do all that, I know that everyone can go back and listen to episode 74. You told your whole story. Is unbelievable story. It's great. Everyone should listen to it. But just catch everybody up right now on sort of what you got going on with Ecom Brokers and et cetera. So refresh everybody.
Yeah, sure. So for those who haven't listened to the previous episode or have got no idea who I am, very quickly, I got into e-commerce in 2016, kind of by accident. My background before that was science. Discovered I was really good at it. I developed a brand of fitness equipment, scaled it up. We were doing about probably 6 million US bucks when I sold it in late 2019, right before the explosion in mergers and acquisitions in e-commerce. And I sold it through a broker, and my experience with that broker probably could have been better. So I made a better one. My accountant and I, that's Allison, she has about 20 years mergers and acquisitions experience, and is an e-commerce specific accountant these days. And I'm on the e-commerce side, so we combined our skill sets to offer e-commerce business owners a better experience in planning their exit and then executing the best possible exit. So that's ecom brokers. And alongside of that, I'm still building brands. And that's important, I think, for two reasons. One is because I love it. And two is because it's not good enough for me to say to clients, oh, well, I understood what it was like to be you until I sold my business in 2019. Because this landscape is moving so fast. I need to understand what it's like now. I mean, just look at all the crazy stuff that's happened in 2021, not least with inventory issues and supply chain issues. And it's important that I have the on the ground experience of that type of thing too. So that's kind of where I am with that. And yeah, ecom brokers came to exist in 2020. Although, well, Alison in particular has been doing mergers and acquisitions for more than 20 years. We're in the UK, which puts us is in an interesting spot because there's a lot of transatlantic stuff going on. But on the other hand, the world is so small now. You know, you guys are in Kansas, I'm in Scotland. We're talking like we're in the same room. It kind of doesn't matter where you are. We're about to close a deal in Mexico with a Mexican seller and a Mexican buyer, and I'm in Scotland. You know, it's a phenomenal world we live in. So that's a very brief rundown on how I got where I am today. So with regards to ecom brokers and what we're doing, basically we help e-commerce business owners, whether they're selling on Amazon or their own site or another platform or a mixture of all those things, plan their exit, whether that is something they want to do very quickly or something that they need a bit of mentorship on, guiding them down a route to exit, which might be many, many months. Either of those is fine. And we help them to sell their business to the right buyer for the best possible price and the deal structure that's right for them. And what we don't do is we don't flip businesses. We carefully sell them.
Well, I can tell you, this is a topic that Chris and I love to talk about. We love to get your insights on it. I could flip my camera around and show, I've got a vision board over here of my ideal selling number for my business. You know, I know Chris
Good
is
that you've got that.
we've got, you know, we're now kind of really focused on building our businesses to sell them.
Yep.
And your story is really interesting. I want to highlight one thing. I mean, you built an e-commerce business, and you did that by, you know, making a good product, making products that people want, making them better. Then you found out that when you tried to sell, you're like, hey, I could probably do brokering better, and so you're like, I can make it better. So it's like that's just the basis of businesses. Could you do a product or a service better? And it takes a lot of work. that's an
Yeah.
easy thing. But that's interesting how that just kind of, I
think that you're totally right. You touch on an important point there, right? One of the foundations of entrepreneurship is spotting the gap. But it's also important to recognize your own weaknesses. Like, I am not an accountant, and I am not an accountant who specializes in mergers and acquisitions. And there's a great book by a guy called Dan Sullivan called Who Not How, which is all about partnering. And so my skill set on understanding the e-commerce world, to some degree being almost the face of the brokerage, but also being able to understand where our clients are and potentially mentoring them on some of the e-commerce aspects if we're going to take them down a route to exit over many months. Partnering those skills with the skills that Allison has on the M&A and the accountancy side, that's where you spot the gap, and then you say, okay, that's the gap. Now, how do we fill it? We've got my skill set. We need different skills here to kind of to completely fill that gap, if that makes sense.
I love that what you just said right there. Like, you spotted the weakness, and as an entrepreneur, it's hard for us sometimes to admit that we have a weakness and like get out of the way because we want to do it. We want to do it ourselves, but that ends up being your strength, is like being able to admit that you suck at something and you need to get somebody else to do it better, is actually a positive thing.
Yeah, and it brings us to a really important point that usually comes up later in the conversation about exits. But since you mentioned, I'll mention it now, right? It's a kind of, if it wasn't so sad, it would be funny. In our e-commerce businesses, we often recognize that we need experts. So some people might say, okay, I need Sellozo to help me with my PPC. Or they might say, right, I need an intellectual property lawyer to help me with my trademarks. Or they might say, I need a professional translator to translate my listings into French. And then these same people who are smart enough to know that make a really terrible mistake with the most valuable asset they have. They say, I'm going to sell my business myself. Oh, dear. The moment they make that decision, they are losing out on 6, maybe 7 or more figures, because they're not a mergers and acquisitions expert. They're not a mergers and acquisitions attorney. And they probably haven't sold a business before. And they don't know how to properly value their business. And we can dig into all those different things. And when they do make that decision to sell their business themselves, the potential buyer of the business is rubbing their hands with glee, because they know that they can get a fantastic bargain, because the person they're dealing with on the other side of the table doesn't know what they're doing, and they've just made a big mistake. So if people would apply that logic that you just mentioned there, Chris, of I'm not an expert on this topic, so I'll get a PPC expert. If they would apply that same logic and say, well, I'm going to get some assistance to plan my exit and then execute my exit, they would do a lot better.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned. I think Dustin's learned as well doing this podcast, is when that time comes, that's not a journey you want to take on your own, because there's a lot of different metrics and numbers. And you just mentioned you can lose out on $600-700. We heard of something called an ad back. Dustin, remember that ad back? We were like, what the hell is that? We were like, we didn't know what that was. And you can manipulate the numbers is a bad word to say, but that's what it was basically.
Well, you're leaving cash.
Dig into that.
Yeah. Yep. So like that's a journey you don't want to take on your own, because it's just overwhelming.
It's not even a case of like, for example, today I had a guy come over and fix the door on our freezer, and I could have done it myself, and I would have done a fine job, but it would have taken me 3 times as long. Yeah. So I paid the guy to come and do it. It's not the case that if you sell your business yourself, that it might take you a little longer, but you'll still do just as good a job. It will not only take you longer, you're going to do far worse of a job, and you're going to lose tons of money. So it's, in the case of that example, if I tried it myself, the door would now be just like sitting on the floor and everything in my freezer would be melting, right? If I'd done it myself. So, you mentioned ad backs there, Chris. That's people listening will be like, what the heck's an ad back? Maybe we should start at the start and talk about and come to that. And maybe we should talk about why might you want to sell in the first place?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's hop in there.
Because a lot of people listening will be like, well, why do I want to sell? I've got a great business. It's like, well, you might not want to sell, and that's absolutely fine. What you want to understand is that one day there's going to have to be some kind of an end game. And you need to think about, well, what's it going to be like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? How's the industry going to have changed? How's the technology going to have changed? How's your own personal life going to have changed? Maybe there are plenty of good reasons why you ought to then think about, if not selling, at least making your business sellable, so that when that time does come, even if you can't foresee it now, your business is in a good state to then pretty rapidly sell it. And so some reasons that you might want to think about selling are, for instance, you might need the money. So maybe you've got a new project. We all know that the most exciting time in a business is when you first have that idea and then you first start bringing it to a reality. And a lot of people have just kind of got fed up with the business that they're running now. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a red flag for a good reason to sell your business, because if you're no longer passionate about it and you don't have the get up and go to make it happen, then you could be pretty quickly either plateauing or declining because you're not the driving force behind it anymore. So that's a perfectly good reason to want to sell. We're selling a business for a guy right now. This is not a word of a lie. This is one of my favorite clients, actually. He's bought a yacht and he's going to sail around the world. So he just wants to sell his business. It's great. Not many people will have that reason, but that's kind of an extreme example.
That's a great reason.
It's a great reason. Yeah, it's a great reason. Maybe you've realized that your business is almost peaked. It's still growing. You haven't quite peaked yet, and now is a really good time to get out. You want to be growing, but don't max out the growth. You need to leave some meat on the bone or a carrot on the stick for the potential new owner to experience some of that growth too. Because after all, that's what they want to do. Maybe you realize that the brand could go somewhere, but you don't have the resources to scale it, and a new owner might. And so it's a good time for you to get out and potentially skew the deal in your favor, such that you can actually still enjoy some of that upside as they take it where it has the potential to go. Or maybe you just recognize you got a cool business and now you could actually take a lot of money off the table. And that sounds quite nice. Thank you very much. Those are all good reasons to sell. But what you can't do is just wake up one day and say, well, I'm going to sell. You need to wake up probably about now and say, I want to make my business sellable, and have a plan in place so that on the day you do wake up and decide you want to sell, you can then start to implement that plan. And the best thing you can do is probably find out what your business is worth, so that at least you have a reference point. You can say, okay, great, my business is worth X. I want to sell it for Y. What are the things I need to do to get there? Otherwise, it's a bit like trekking through the jungle without a map. You don't know where you are and you don't know where you're trying to get to. And that's not a very smart way to do things.
That's a big part. Then I'll pause right there. That's a big step right there. Like getting to know where your business currently is a big eye opener, because you may think you want to sell it for 5 million. And when you go get an evaluation, you're not selling it. You're just trying to get an evaluation. You may get an evaluation of 1 million and you're like, okay, I want to get to 5. Now I know it's worth 1. Now I know what I need to do to get there.
Yeah. So, and that can start to guide the decisions you make.
Yeah.
And you might actually find that things you had planned to do, you might decide now to do them slightly differently based on what you know about what your business is worth and what your magic number is, and maybe what you know about your industry and the way you see it going, that type of thing. So just having a reference point is really, really useful.
What's the, don't interrupt you, what's the best way to get that reference point? What's the best way to find out the valuation of your company right now?
So that's a good question. So why don't we talk about how business is valued, and then people listening will be able to do kind of a back of an envelope valuation for themselves.
Yeah.
Which would be very back of an envelope, because there's a lot of good reasons that I'll probably rant about later about why when it comes to like really putting together an actual exit strategy, this has to be done by a professional who has the M&A chops and the accountancy chops to understand what they're doing. So how is an e-commerce business valued? Basically, we generally, so I'm going to make this a bit simpler because it's not always this case, but so for the purposes of simplicity and for the widest audience possible, generally speaking, we take the trailing 12-month performance and multiply that by something called the multiple, and we arrive at what the business is worth. Generally, sometimes it's not trailing 12 months. Sometimes it's actually trailing 6 or 9 months. Sometimes we're doing more of a forecast, but let's just talk about trailing 12 months for the purposes of simplicity. So what do I mean by trailing 12-month performance? Usually in e-commerce, we're talking about something called SDE, which is seller's discretionary earnings, which is effectively your net income of the business plus what you mentioned earlier, Chris, add backs, but also plus something else called adjustments. Now, sometimes we don't use SDE, we use something called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, but I'm not going to get into that on the podcast today because it's just going to get too messy. So let's just talk about SDE to keep it simple. Net income plus add backs and adjustments. So what are add backs? Add backs are a couple of things. First of all, they are personal related expenses that a new owner wouldn't expect to have to pay for. So that's things that business owners personally are putting through the business. Could be phone, travel, salary, health insurance, office costs, that type of thing. Other add backs include things like one-off costs that won't have to be repeated. So if you just registered a trademark last month, it's done. Not going to have to be done again. That's an add back. Videography you just had done for a product, it's been done. Not going to do it again. It's an add back. Photography, it's been done. Not going to be done again. All these things are add backs. Also, repeated costs that a new owner is probably not going to take on. So this might depend on who the buyer is. Let's suppose we're talking about a business being sold to an e-commerce aggregator. If you're paying a regular consulting fee with a coach, they're not going to need that. Add it back. If you're paying a regular fee for software, they're already subscribed to all the big software packages. Not going to need that. Add it back. Get the idea. That alone can be quite good. You'll find that the basic kind of marketplace and flipper services will do the basics. Probably, phone, travel, salary, that type of thing. And if you're trying to deal with a buyer on your own, you'll probably be able to do those things. But what's really, really important are the adjustments. And adjustments recognize change in the P&L, change in the profit and loss in the last 12 months, and also recognize or are an attempt to recognize what is the true value of the business on day zero, the day that the new owner becomes the owner. And there are a few ways that we can make appropriate adjustments. So let's imagine a couple of scenarios. Suppose you have a product that you're selling, and 3 months ago, you negotiated a lower price with your supplier. So now you're making more profit per unit on that product. And the new owner is going to make more profit per unit on that product. But you only negotiated that new lower price 3 months ago. So if we go with the standard method, it's only going to contribute 3 months worth of extra profit towards your seller's discretionary earnings and therefore the value of your business. But that's not very fair because the new owner is going to get the benefit of the lower price. So it's entirely reasonable, if we're going to talk about what is the true value of the business, to adjust as if every unit of that product that you bought from your supplier for the whole 12 months was at that lower price. Do that across several products, possibly quite a lot of units. That's potentially a lot of money.
That's a big number.
Big number. Here's another example.
And whatever that difference is going to get added
compounded by your multiple. And your multiple will probably be going up too because it's a better business, right? Because the multiple will tend to go up as the SDE goes up, right? So it's a compounding effect on multiple levels, several levels. Here's another example. Suppose you increase the price on a product, and when you did that, you didn't see a drop in sales. In fact, sales stayed the same or went up because maybe customers now see your product as being more premium. Well, the new owner is going to get the benefit of selling that product at the higher price. What if you did that 6 months ago? Well, let's extrapolate back another 6 months so that for the full 12 months, we're saying that every sale of that product was at the higher price. It's a reasonable thing to do, and it is entirely justifiable. Difficult to get past a potential new owner when you're on your own and you don't have somebody fighting your corner, an accountant who's demonstrating, here's what we did, here's why we did it, here's why it's justifiable, etc., showing you're working, as my maths teacher used to say at school. Here's another one. Suppose you very recently hit the threshold at which it made economic sense for you to start shipping your products by sea rather than by air. New owner is going to be shipping by sea. Let's adjust the COGS as if you've always shipped by sea. In fact, there was one where we were able to, we basically knew that the new owner, most of the new buyers will be doing this, were consolidating all the brands they had and shipping everything by sea. And the seller had always shipped by air. We adjusted the COGS as if they were shipping by sea. This is entirely justified. Now we have to present this up front to the potential owner when they're doing their due diligence. We have to say, look, these are the adjustments we have made. This is why it's justifiable. It's then up to them to try and push back against it. You can't fudge the numbers and lie about it. But you're basically adjusting. Another way to think about it is that you're forecasting. Here's what it will look like when it's in your hands rather than the seller's hands, right? Those are just a few examples, but Alison goes really deep on this type of stuff and has tons more. When you do that across several products, possibly across several international marketplaces, if we're talking about a business that's a reasonable size anyway, that quickly adds up 6-7 figures to the value of the business, that alone.
Those three things are huge. Cost of goods, the shipping changes, and the price.
Yep. What if here's another one, right? We've done this very recently. We're doing this for a client right now, multiple clients right now, who they went out of stock, and they had a reason that they were out of stock, which 99.99999% of the time, the new owner is not going to be affected by that same reason. This new owner who has like an entire supply chain team. So we're adjusting as if they hadn't gone out of stock.
Wow.
That's a big adjustment.
Yeah. And it was a lengthy stock out. They actually they changed suppliers and moved to a much more reliable supplier, which was a smart move and made the business much more sellable and valuable, because the relationship of the business with the supplier is really, really important. It's one of the things that makes a business sellable and valuable. And so those are the types of adjustments that you can make. So SDE, net income plus add backs and adjustments. So then we take that SDE, which needs to have been calculated by a professional. And whatever you do, right? This is the kind of crazy thing that really I find hilarious is aggregators are saying, we'll give you a free valuation. Wait, what? That's like me going to view a house that I want to buy and me saying to the house owner, I'm going to give you a valuation. That's not how it works. So you have business owners who are otherwise smart people who built great businesses that have a complete brain fart, and they send their P&L and their financials off to the aggregator and wait for the aggregator to send them back what they're going to pay them for their business. It's hilarious. And so the aggregator will dangle a pretty large carrot in front of the business owner, possibly more money than they've ever dreamed of having. But the reality is that business is not worth a carrot. It's worth like a whole field of carrots. Yeah. If only they would go through this appropriate process, which happens in every other industry. In every other industry, you go through a process to bring your business to sale. So you get your SDE, you multiply it by a multiple. So what about the multiple? Let me give you a couple of examples. Suppose you got a business that's got an SDE of like 100 grand. So not enormous. It's 2 years old. It's reasonably diversified. You got several products. It's selling purely on Amazon, and it's growing. You'll probably get 3 to 3.5x. Might get a bit more depending on the category. Suppose though that your SDE is 500 grand, and you've got massive off Amazon sales, lots of IP, tons of growth, and it's 5 years old. So 2 great things are going to happen. One, not only have you got an SDE that's 500 grand instead of 100 grand, but it's not simply the case that your 500 grand multiplied by 3 is 1.5 million instead of 100 grand multiplied by 3, right? It's 500 grand multiplied by a bigger multiple, because as the SDE goes up and all the other protective factors you have around the business, whether that's diversity, intellectual property, the growth history, the age, all these other factors, your multiple is going to go up too. So it's not just 500 grand multiplied by that same 3x, it's 500 grand multiplied by 4 to 6x. And now we're talking, lots of money. We're talking, don't have to work another day in your life money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference of when you go through a proper process and when you don't. So SDE's got to be calculated by a professional who has the accountancy and the M&A experience, and they understand e-commerce, and they also need to understand the market that you're operating in and what multiple should be. Otherwise, you're leaving tons of money on the table. And that should, whoever you're working with, that should, if they're doing their job properly and they're good people, that will pay for their fee multiple times over. The idea is that the expert you're working with needs to be adding value. So however their fee is structured in, it needs to be paying for the value that they're adding to the business. The ironic thing is that when you're dealing directly with a buyer, if we're talking about e-commerce aggregators for a moment, which we mostly are, they'll say, deal with us directly and avoid the broker fee. But actually, if you went with a good broker, you would make tons more money because you're going to go through this appropriate process. So what they're really saying is, please don't work with a competent broker who'll properly calculate your SDE and apply a correct multiple to it, and will bring multiple potential buyers to the table, so we have to bid against them. So that's, it's a funny world. So yeah, that's add backs and adjustments and SDE and valuation, I guess.
Well, I can tell you, when you do this, when sellers are going to go do this, you definitely want a broker, because they're going to have skin in the game, and it's going to be in their best interest to make sure that you get the best multiple. And the rest. So you definitely want a broker in this instance.
Yeah, because the more they sell your business for, that's certainly how we work. The more they sell your business for, the more money they will get, and it's in their interest. And in any case, if they value their reputation, then they'll be doing a good job.
Let's talk about the aggregator and buyer space right now, because I mean it's like insane. It's insane. It's the Wild West. Every day there's there's new aggregators everywhere. They're doing all kinds of direct marketing straight to businesses. I mean, you get emails all the time from them. I mean, I'm assuming that some are really good, some are probably a little more shady, some are newer, some are more established. It's crazy, and it can be confusing. But then there's also a whole lot of other ways that you don't have to sell your business to an aggregator. No. You can sell it to a private family.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And that's important to remember, that it's not the case that you're necessarily going to sell to an aggregator. There's nothing wrong with selling to an aggregator. I sold the first brand I exited to an aggregator, to the aggregator.
I remember you saying that.
I can actually talk about it. They use me in all their PR. I sold to Thrasio in 2019, right before all this kicked off. So before I start slagging off aggregators, full disclosure, I like aggregators, right? Sure. And their approach kind of makes sense, because business is business. But you shouldn't sell direct to an aggregator, because you need to take your business through the appropriate process. It's also important to know that a lot of these aggregators, probably 80% of them, are going to fail, because they know how to raise money, which is great, but they know diddly squat about e-commerce. And we're seeing it already. Some of them are in trouble for various reasons, which will not be discussed publicly on this podcast. And some are frantically trying to merge with each other.
Some are out of inventory.
Some are, yes, plenty are out of inventory. Some have got suspended accounts for various reasons. Some quick Googling will tell you what's going on there.
Yeah.
So it's important, therefore, that when you do sell, if it's to an aggregator, that the deal is structured such that you are protected, especially if they're not one of the few that really have the operational chops. For a lot of sellers, we just wouldn't recommend selling to a buyer who we don't believe has the operational capability, unless most of the deal is upfront, and B, anything that isn't upfront is really well protected. So, for example, if you're going to have an earnout with an aggregator, there needs to be a sliding scale, such that if the aggregator doesn't hit the sales target, remember, it's them that's running the thing now, you're protected, and you don't lose out on hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars because Bob in supply chain didn't bother to place another order at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, because he doesn't care about your earnout, right? Mm-hmm. Deal needs to also make sure that you get read-only access to any platform in which they're selling your brand, so that you can have a look in there and check in and say, hey guys, did anyone notice this, and this? Because I think we could avoid a problem here if we just do such and such. And that's just a great way to avoid any of those problems in the first place. The deal needs to be such that if they run out of inventory, you still get your earn out. So that's pretty easy to do. You just say, if they run out of inventory for more than, X, say a week, in any particular, say 30-day period, or a bit longer potentially, then you get the full earn out or the full stability payment. These types of things, when the right mergers and acquisitions attorney, who a good broker will be partnering with, will help you with, and then you're going to be okay. But the aggregators are fine. They're good people. I talk to them every day and I like them, but they don't necessarily have the operational capability that you might be hoping for. And that's why it's important to remember that a good broker will not just be firing off an email to 100 aggregators, but will be casting a wide net to find the most appropriate buyer for your business, which could be an aggregator, or we might just have to get real and say this is a business for an aggregator, but could be other private equity, could be a family office, could be a competitor, could be a private individual, could be, say, a competitor from another geography who wants to get a foothold where you are. Could be a bit of a hybrid, like an aggregator who's rolling up e-commerce brands, but then taking them out across physical retail stores across North America or the Middle East or wherever it might be. Lots of different ways to do it. And the lazy flipper services and marketplaces won't do that for you. And the right brokers will, and therefore will have a really good competitive environment of the right buyers when the business goes to market. And that's really important. So, when an aggregator approaches you, and if you've got a good business, they will. It's flattering. It's very exciting, right? Last night you cried down the phone to sell support until 3 a.m. and now somebody wants to buy your business for quite a lot of money. And they'll find you because they have lists of sellers and they're scraping Amazon. They've got tools to scrape Amazon. But unfortunately, the lower price that you're going to end up with and the poor deal structure, which is entirely skewed in their favor, makes it not a very good outcome. And it's incredibly hard work. You're trying to run your business at the same time as you're trying to sell it yourself. It just doesn't make sense. And so, in response to that, the flipper model emerged, where you basically list your business on like an eBay of businesses. You pay quite a lot. The fees tend to be pretty high. And ultimately, you'll end up with a lower valuation because they don't have a team of proper M&A and accountancy experts running your valuation. They have a team often of VAs or people who aren't particularly qualified in any of the fields that they need to be, who just take a Google Sheet template, download reports from Amazon and Shopify, and then slap a value on it based on the average of what they've sold for the last 6 months. And very, very poor in terms of the add backs and adjustments. Well, there won't be any adjustments. And this is where Allison saved the day when I was selling my business with a not very good broker. So that's not a great model either. So in response to that model, we've seen the emergence of these M&A consultants who will say, hey, for only 4 or 5%, I'll connect you with the right buyer. And so then they just ping off an email to 100 aggregators and see who replies without doing any work on your business. Because if they're only charging you 4 or 5%, they won't be doing any work. And then here's the bad bit. This is not the uncool bit. They're double dipping. They're taking like a 50, 70, 80 grand referral fee from the buyer, from the aggregator. So they're not working in your best interest, and that's not cool. So in response to that poor model, we saw the emergence of these marketplaces. And they sound fantastic because you don't pay any fees. No fees to list on this marketplace, which is a lie because you are paying a fee. Who pays the fee? The buyer. The aggregator pays the fee. Where does that money come from? It comes from the money they would have paid you.
Mm-hmm.
And in any case, you still end up dealing directly with them. And the marketplace is operating at such a scale that you're not going to get a really very bespoke service. So that doesn't work either. So that takes us back to the solution that works in every other mature industry in the entire world and has done for hundreds of years is use a qualified broker who hopefully have got experience on all sides. They're business owners who understand e-commerce. They've got the mergers and acquisition skills and the accountancy skills. And they're not interested in making a quick buck. They're interested in working with you based on your goals, whether that's time or money related or both, to get your business ready for sale, neat and tidy with a ribbon on top, present it to a pool of the right buyers who may be aggregators, but hopefully involve some other areas as well. And then we'll work with you and connect you with the right legal expert to make sure that the deal is structured to favor you and not the other guy. And that's the way that you really should do it.
I mean, I don't know what else there is to say.
The game plan.
That's the game. So the question is, at what part of the journey should somebody start communicating with you? When do they start working with you?
Is there a dollar amount they need to hit?
We're in the business of helping people. So I talk to people all the time who actually, I spoke to a guy today who literally has just opened his Seller Central account and registered with a Shopify account, right? And I was more than happy to talk to the guy because, first of all, I just like helping people. And second of all, at the moment, we spoke earlier about not knowing where you are, what's your reference point. But now he knows where he is. He's literally at the start. But he also knows what his goal is, right? And all he wants to do is grow a nice business and sell it for somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 bucks. That's all he wants to do. He's not, and on the other hand, we've got clients that want to sell for 8 figures. It's a very, very different world. Absolutely fine. But now the guy has a reference point, and he I spoke him through how we value a business, what it would look like if he did X, Y, Z, and now he knows where he's going, right? I'm not saying you need to contact a broker the moment you open your Seller Central account. It's just that was just an extreme example. The guy heard me on a webinar and got in touch. It's never too early to start planning. So if you've been watching, go back and watch the bit where I spoke about how to value your business and think about, right, what's my, more or less, what is my net income? What are like the personal one-off expenses in the last 12 months? Add them back. And that's your SDE. And then be realistic about what you think would be an appropriate multiple for your business. And I would say be conservative. It's going to be somewhere between 2 and 6, probably more like 3, depending, of course. That's very, very, I'm keeping it simple for a wide audience. And you have at least a rough idea of what your business is worth. And then ask yourself, okay, do I want to sell it for that? What do I want to sell it for? And then you need to probably, at that point, it's contact a good broker. And so, for instance, us, and say, okay, here's where I am. Here's where I want to get to. How can you help me? That's really what it is. I don't think it's never too early to at least start thinking about that roadmap. Otherwise, just like I said, one day you wake up and you say, I want to sell, but you don't, your business isn't sellable because you haven't built in, all the things to make your business sellable. And we can talk about what some of those are if you want, is it stable? Are you operating in a niche which is attractive or risky, or a fad? Have you been dabbling in any black hat strategies? Are you diversified, or are you, basically relying on one SKU or 2 SKUs or one marketplace or stream of income? Are you getting tons of sales on your own website, but it's all coming from one Facebook ad that could get shut down at any minute? Is it a transferable business? Can you hand over the keys tomorrow? You got good documentation and systems and processes in place? Are you protected by intellectual property? Have you got your trademarks done both in the countries you're selling in and the countries you're manufacturing in? So if you're manufacturing in China, get Chinese trademarks, for instance, those types of things. Are you making any money? Is it profitable? See, we get inquiries on our forum and our website all the time of people who are like, I've been making a loss for some time now. Is my business sellable? And hey, loss-making businesses get sold when they're like really exciting tech products, right? And Google wants to acquire them. Run-of-the-mill e-commerce businesses, unless there's something incredibly exciting in terms of the intellectual property going on, don't. So make your business profitable. Is it defensible? Like, have you got a real brand, or are you just selling like stuff like, the 2015, 16 days where everyone just like opened an Amazon account to sell a mishmash of, I don't know, fidget spinners and pocket calculators? Or have you got a legitimate brand, right? Have you developed a brand of knitting equipment for knitting fans? Hopefully you're building a brand. That's going to make your business sellable. What else? We mentioned suppliers earlier. You got a good relationship with your supplier? Are they reliable? Have you met them? Have they got really good audits? Have they got ISO 14001, which is an environmental standard, ISO 9001 quality standard? Have they been audited for not using child labor? Where are they? In the US, of course, there's been the issues there was the Trump taxes, but there's been issues in China recently with factories getting closed because of power outages, which is kind of nuts. Nothing wrong with sourcing in China. You can source great stuff in China, but have you thought outside the box? Are you sourcing somewhere else? Maybe you ever been there? Have you met your supplier? That's really important. Often that can be really attractive. We're selling a business right now where the guy, he's a UK guy, he's a British guy, lived in China for 2 years, speaks fluent Chinese, and has a phenomenal relationship with the business owner, with the supplier. Sorry, and he's going to be really key in the transition of the business owner because he speaks fluent Chinese. Right? Not saying you have to go speak fluent Chinese, but form a great relationship with your supplier. Is your business automated? Right? Are you using tools to automate your business that's going to make it really easy to run for the new owner? Or are you working like 15-hour days? Because if you are, that's going to get found out in due diligence, and the new owner is not going to want to buy that business. It's okay if your team's working 15-hour days and the team's going to go with the business, but you can't be. So, those are all things to think about.
I remember that was a trick question. So I thought that was a trick question when I first did evaluation. The company said, how many hours a day you work in your business? And I was like, oh God, all the time. I'm always working it. And the answer was like, you're supposed to say 0.
Yeah. Wrong answer. Don't, it's important that don't dumb it down, right? It's important that the potential owner recognizes the effort that you're putting in, but also is able to envisage how they can absorb that into their existing system.
Yeah.
And so systems and programs.
You can't be the business.
Yeah.
You can't. You can be the face of the business.
Right.
You can be the face of the business. I was the face of my brand. That is still a perfectly sellable thing, but you cannot be the business. Put it this way. If you fall down the stairs and break your legs tomorrow and end up in hospital, is your business going to run without you? If the answer is no, then it ain't sellable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay, because everybody listening is making a plan now. We're all making a plan so that when it is time to sell, you can fall down the stairs and break your legs as many times as you want. Your business will be fine.
Oh, that's funny. That was what attracted me to the whole FBA model anyway, way back in 2014, was that it was FBA by nature was automating a lot of the hard part about running a retail brand. It's like, so they'll handle all of the fulfillment for me, and all I have to do is have my supplier send it straight to them. Okay.
That sounds easy.
That's
4-hour work week right there.
Yeah, that's right.
Or not.
Scalable. So man, that was a lot of information.
I rambled a bit. I'm sorry. I get excited.
Awesome. This gets me every
good.
time I have this conversation. I get so fired up. I get refocused back on that magic number that's across from me, and I'm like, okay,
that's the thing, right? Here's the thing. People listening should have a magic number, but the magic number needs to be realistic as well. So think about find out what your business is worth now. If your business is worth, whatever now, your magic number can't be, $1 squillion, right? We need to be realistic here in terms of what is then achievable in the next, and then it comes down to what's your timeline. When do you want to sell, right? In the next, whether it's 9 months or 18 months or whatever it is. And you need to think about also what's happening in your industry, in your niche, right? We're selling a business for somebody right now, and there's a whole ton of regulation pouring into that business right now, that niche right now, because it's very new. And so a lot of potential buyers are sitting on their hands because they're not sure what's going on with the regulations, so they don't want to spend any money right now. That's okay, but it's something that we have to navigate. These are the things people need to think about, right? What's happening with their competitors? What's going on Amazon and off Amazon in that niche? So think about all the factors that can affect when you want to sell and what your magic number is going to be and whether it's realistic. And how high does it need to be? Like some people say, I want to sell for 20 million. And I'm like, that's great. What are you going to do with all that money? And they're like, oh. And it's like, well, selling. I was having a conversation the other day with a guy, a really great guy who I respect a lot, who was talking about the difference between the millionaire and the billionaire mindset. And he's a really, really smart entrepreneur who wants to make a ton of money. And I'm just like, making money is fantastic, but I don't need to make that much money. And actually, you got to kind of remember the path of least resistance here. And how much money do you need to achieve your goals? So if your goals require that you are the next Elon Musk, then, well, by all means have those goals. But if your goals are such that you want to have enough money that you will be set for life, you could technically retire now, you'll never have to worry about money again, then you don't need to be trying to sell your business for 20 million. You know, $3 million will do the job perfectly well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will be sitting on a business that they could sell for that right now, and they don't know it.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Oh man, I know a lot of people the wheels are turning right now for a lot of people listening to this.
Go work out more or less what your STE is, apply a multiple, make that multiple conservative, like smaller than you think it could be. Mm-hmm. Then come talk to us and find out what your business is worth, and then compare that to your magic number. Maybe it's already as much as your magic number, or it's close enough that you're ready to go for it.
All right, tell everybody how they do reach out to talk to you.
Yep. You can email me, which is easy, ben@ecombrokers.co.uk. It's a UK domain, but we're operating all over the world. You can go to ecombrokers.co.uk and click on a big button that says value your business or sell your business, and put in some basic details there, and we'll get back to you. And I'm on LinkedIn. I like to chat on LinkedIn.
I added all the links and stuff to the description and everything. So if people listening, check out the description.
Yeah. Ben, we got to get you. We need to make this. I know this is the second time you've been on, but we need to make this periodic because this landscape does change.
It's changing a lot. And there's tons more. I've rambled a lot today. I hope people haven't been too bored. But there's more and more, like there's tons of interesting stuff happening. And lots of stuff you can talk about, lots of deal structure. It's something that we didn't even really talk about much today. We can go into that another day. All sorts of stuff.
Cool. Well, we will definitely have you back on because, I mean, like I said, obviously, selfishly, Chris and I are both very interested in this topic a lot. And I know
clients.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we'll definitely get you back on. We'll schedule it. We'll get that going, and we'll talk about. I'd love the deal structure topic. That'd be fantastic to learn how those are done. So we'll do that. Thanks so much. I know it's late evening there for you, but we really appreciate you.
Pleasure. No, I appreciate talking to you guys. It's good fun.
It is. So everyone, make sure you go to ecombrokers.co.uk. Like you said, click the big button and you can get the conversation started with them. Highly recommend it, no matter what stage you're at in your journey, like Ben mentioned. And so also, if you like content like this, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Leave us a review. Let us know how you're doing. You can also follow us on our Sellozo's Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, our YouTube channel. We live stream these every time we have awesome guests like Ben on our show. So you turn on notifications so you get notified when we go live. And you can get all these great tips that we talk about on a daily basis. Also, if would like Ben mentioned, the more automated your business is, the more attractive it is. Sellozo's here to help automate your advertising. We have plenty of options for you, whether it's just our tool that's automating it for you, whether it's our team that's fully managing it to help make your advertising as successful as possible. Go to sellozo.com. You can book a demo and you'll get either Chris or myself. We can talk about anything Amazon related and let you know how Sellozo can help manage the advertising for your business and automate it so it's more valuable and more sellable. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us, Ben. We'll see everybody next time. Have a great day.